atWork Australia would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and pay our respect to elders past and present. This podcast is being recorded in the southwest and Western Australia, which is land of the Noongar people. We'd also like to pay our respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands from wherever you may be listening from. This episode may refer to explicit drug use, self-harm, or domestic violence. If you need support, please refer to the links in our show notes or on our website. Welcome to another episode of Candid Conversations with Shaun. In today's episode, we're going to hear from one of our amazing clients who then become an atWork Australia employee. She talks about how the trauma she experienced in her youth led her down a dark pathway in her teen years. But by seeking the right support, she's been able to come out the other side. She's been able to go through university and eventually return to the career and the job that she loves. I really hope you enjoy listening to this episode, as I really enjoyed my conversation with Vanessa. She was very vulnerable and spoke about some of the troublesome things that happened throughout her life. I hope you enjoy, guys. Thank you so much for taking the time today and come on and have a chat with me about your personal story and your journey with atWork Australia so far.
Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Well, first of all, I want to start with a big congratulations. I know you've just recently started a new role with the Des Allied Health team. So how's your first few weeks been going in that new role?
Yeah, thanks. It's been different, definitely different. It's got its own challenges. I've had a lot of change. I've been with the company for just under 2 years. So I feel by the time I get a grips of one of the roles, I'm moving into a new one, which is not a bad thing. And this is the field I want to be in. So yeah, it's been really good. It has its challenges, but I've got to learn to be patient. And just like every other time that I've picked up a role, I will do that too, even though at the time it doesn't seem that possible, but you always figure it out.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear the first few weeks are going well. And yeah, any new job's going to be challenging, but that's half the fun, isn't it?
Definitely. Otherwise, you need to, basically for me, the more challenge it is, it means you're growing. So it's a good thing. If you're starting to get a bit bored, then you probably need to move on to something more challenging.
100% agree. But before we talk more about what you're doing now, if you don't mind, I'd like to rewind a little bit because I believe you actually come to atWork Australia as a client. Do you mind telling us a bit about your life journey that led you down the path of needing support from atWork Australia?
Yeah. Well, do we have time to go far back? So look, I guess I'll tell you a little bit about, my background and where things came as to why I came to a disability employment service. So, I grew up in a family that when I was younger seemed to be, it was loving. I thought there was no issues there, but I was quite shielded away, I guess, from my parents' conflict, which caused a lot of anxiety for me. Being the youngest, I was kept in the dark a lot, which, caused me to struggle even more. I struggled at school, never particularly felt smart at all. I struggled a lot within myself. I did lead a normal life until, I realized that my dad was unfaithful and had a drinking problem and didn't realize the impact that has on you until I was a lot older. In my teenage years, I was really angry, really frustrated, angry at the world. School, challenging, teachers would tell me, don't go to uni, you're not smart enough. I did have dyslexia. However, I didn't find that out until I went to uni, and uni was quite hard. It had its setbacks. I did fail my units, which that's where I reached out to get some help. And that's where I found out I had dyslexia. So that was a struggle in its own. And I went down, I guess, a dark kind of way. I had a lot of impulses and unhealthy ways of coping. It included, drug use. And it was coming from, symptoms of deeper issues, which at the time I wasn't aware of. Once I entered into, my adulthood, I had quite toxic relationships, which, impacted my self-worth. I had crippling anxiety and it was burying me. And I had quite deep trauma within me, which I wasn't aware of. And it took me to reach out. Well, I hit rock bottom first, then it got me to reach out to see a psychiatrist. And a lot of my trauma was unrevealed, which is insane how the brain, protects you from that until you're ready for it. So, it came out that I was sexually abused as a child and an early adult. However, the more and more I found out about these triggers of anger, I started to realize that some of these decisions I made were just ways of coping. So, it took a lot of stress away. For me, it would have been, I think medication was a big change for me. It's not for everyone, but for me, it was like having some training wheels. So I knew what basic was again. And then I was able to unpack my trauma. One of the things I always share with people, because for me, it was a big turning point. There was a retreat out in Newcastle called Heal for Life Foundation, and they kind of helped me rebuild myself. They kind of worked through, what does trauma do to the brain, help me learn to de-trigger. So that was extremely helpful for me. I guess moving on from that, kind of answering more your question, how I come into atWork, I was medically retired from my previous job due to my diabetes, is how they put it down. However, I did have major mental health, which I didn't know about at the time. And that's what caused me to, I guess, reach out to Centrelink. And Centrelink told me about some disability employment service. And I was like, hold up, I don't have a disability. And, and I get it now that I've been on the other side, that people don't like that word sometimes, or, I didn't think diabetes or, mental health came under that, but it does all come under the same umbrella. And they connected me to a local service around here. I was very reluctant because I've worked with other employment providers and I don't even remember anything about them besides it wasn't good. And that's how I got, I guess, my foot in the door in coming to an employment service. So, yeah, that's why I said, do you have time?
Yeah, it's quite a long journey, and just listening to you explain about the journey and the path you've been on, it creates so many questions. So if you don't mind me going back, like you saying you experienced anger and you were suffering from mental health concerns, but you didn't know it was related to the trauma you suffered when you were younger. Is that because you didn't remember what happened to you as you were younger, or you didn't recognize that as being trauma or as something that shouldn't have happened?
Yeah, I didn't remember. I knew that, I knew the thing about my dad, being unfaithful and the drinking, because, that was a constant fight in the house. But in regards to being sexually abused and that part of my trauma, I guess I didn't realize until, I had my fair share years of using drugs. First it was for fun and then I was in denial, but I definitely did have that problem. And when I stopped using the drugs, and for me, it was medication, so I knew that baseline. I started to get all these bits and pieces of things, which can be really scary because you're like, is my brain lying to me? Why is it giving it to me now? And it took a lot of psychoeducation and help from other psychologists to understand what it all meant. Because even now I'm still like, did I make it up? But 100%. Well, I know 100% I didn't. And, a lot of people would be in the same boat. For me, it took finding out through other people that were in similar situations, which can re-traumatize people. But that was my journey and that's what I needed.
Yeah, the brain seems quite incredible how it can block certain parts of your past out to try and protect you and sort of save you from that trauma. But I guess it's created more trauma and eventually it sort of boiled over and that's how it's all come out, right?
Yeah, definitely. And, it's not something that you can get through overnight. For me, it got harder before it got better. And, you're always chasing those diagnoses because I was like, no, there's not something wrong with me. And I did get all my diagnoses, but in the end, that didn't really matter. It was me healing and understanding that things that happened were out of my control and I've made decisions to survive. They're my coping mechanisms. So I've learned to take that pressure away of I'm a bad person. I did bad things.
Yeah, because it wasn't your fault. And then, like you said before, you ask yourself those questions. Am I imagining this? Am I making that up? How does that further impact on your mental health when you just begin to stew on something over and over and start to question your sanity and your memory?
Yeah, no, definitely it does. And, that gets to a point that you do. And for me, it was, when you go to psychologists or counselors, at the start I would go and they'll tell me, you can figure it out because, they could see I understood. But like I tell people, if you're a doctor and you break your leg, you still need to go to, another doctor to help you. And in this case, it was the same. And they would give me things to use. And I was just like, oh, this is silly. This isn't going to work. I don't need to learn to breathe again, all kind of these things. But then I realized that just going to talk about it wasn't enough. Yeah, it was a good start and helped a lot, but I needed to start putting in the work on my own. And, it was grounding yourself more. I did a lot of visualizations and a lot of inner child work, actually, with my therapist, which for me is something I really needed to do because I guess my child wasn't protected, littleness.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, how old were you when you suffered this trauma and the sexual abuse?
Yeah, it started around the age of 6, 7.
It wasn't a one-off incident?
No, not at all. No, not at all. And it was a family member. So,
Oh,
yeah, so that was, I guess, a shock because, knowing someone all your life and then, it goes another way. At the start, I had so much hate for that person and, all I wanted to do was hurt. But then I realized these are normal, emotions that you get when you're trying to deal with what's happened. And it took me a while, but, now I'm in a part of understanding because in my story, it was a generational trauma that was passed down. Not that it makes it okay, but for me, that's how I was able to. But I know that's not the situation for everyone. It's scary. It was scary at the time. Obviously, it doesn't leave your mind forever, but I can talk about it now and share to others. So people that are going through the same thing. And the more I talk about it now, it's like I can get in therapy through it more.
Yeah. And I guess why all this is going on, do you continue living under the same roof as this person?
No, I don't live under the same roof with this person.
No, at the time, like back when you were 6,
Oh,
7 years old, was that?
yes, I lived in the house with a person that it was happening with. And it wasn't one person, it was a few people. So living in a home, in that environment would have been really hard. But now looking back, thinking that at school, I thought I was dumb. And, I was diagnosed with dyslexia. But now looking back, I wonder if it was because I was so distracted with so much that was happening that I wasn't
Yeah.
present to the moment.
You definitely wouldn't. You would have been going to school with so much more on your mind, not being able to pay attention. And then I guess your outbreaks in behavior sort of all becomes explained later on in life when you figure out what's been going on.
Yeah, definitely. It was liberating, but doesn't mean you don't have your days where you don't feel great about it still, and there is little triggers because, we get triggered by our senses. The smell of beer for me is a trigger and I know that, but, it's working through those tools to make yourself feel safe because I guess that fear center in your brain thinks it's happening now, but you got to tell yourself that, it's not happening right now, but your body might still be scared, but it's okay. So it took a lot of work and I'm not going to say I'm perfect. Every day I'm learning something new.
Yeah. I have no idea of the pain and struggles that you've been through, but I can somehow, I lost my eyesight nearly 15 years ago, so I'm now legally blind. And although it happened 15 years ago and I've come to terms with it and I've accepted it and my life's moved on, you still have days where you think about what would have happened if this was different. You still ask yourself these questions. So I can only imagine what questions you sort of ask yourself on a regular basis.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Especially when I'm in those, feeling upset, feeling angry, my partner's heard it thousands of times where I'm like, why? This isn't my fault, why did I deserve this? And it does suck and you can have those days, but, I learned not to live in it for too much because it doesn't serve me a purpose. It's where you are now in the journey that's taken you there. It's definitely made me a stronger person. I was very shy as a kid. I would never thought I'd be here, especially in a podcast talking. And, now sharing that wisdom with other people. Every day is a new day with mental health. I've also got type 1 diabetes. I've got a lot of other health things. But I always say to people, diabetes, type 1, I've had it since I was 11. That's hard. But mental health, if I could give one back, I think I would choose mental health because you don't know what you're going to get. And, with diabetes, yes, I have to do all this testing, do all my needles, but there's a way that I know how to, treat it. Unless if I'm eating things that I shouldn't, or I get sick, things might change a little bit. But overall, it's more predictable than mental health.
Yeah. Personally, I haven't experienced severe mental health, but I understand it can be debilitating at times and it's invisible. So to the outside world, it's hard for people to understand exactly what you're going through.
Yeah, look, I totally agree. For me, so many people, when I tell them, my diagnosis, which, I've got type 1 diabetes, which I just mentioned since I was 11, got the chronic PTSD, I've got ADHD as well, the anxiety. I've also got BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, which is a big thing that comes from trauma, that's why I'm so reactive to things. So if I'm triggered, I'm very reactive. I've definitely learned how to regulate those emotions better. Doesn't mean they're perfect, but if it does happen, they're a lot shorter. I'm aware of them. I can come back. So if you look back from before to now, always celebrate the small wins is what I tell people.
Yeah, definitely. Is there, situations now that you actively try and avoid? I know you just mentioned that sometimes the smell of alcohol can be triggering. Is there other scenarios or situations where you're like, I just can't do that because it's going to be too traumatic for me?
Yeah, look, before I would say yes, before I worked on my traumas, there was a lot more. But at the moment, not so much now, but I would say just before starting with atWork, because I was able to stop the drugs, but I linked alcohol to drugs. So I knew if I started to drink, that urge would come out. So I knew to stay away from going out and drinking for a little bit until I could control that. And once I was able to, and I said no that time, even though deep down I still wanted it, when I got home, you never regret saying no, you regret saying yes.
Yeah.
So it was sitting through that urge and I was angry. I went through the things, but, your brain will trick you and create excuses as to why you should go back.
Yeah. I guess with your drinking and your drug use, did that sort of start on the party scene? You're sort of going out on the weekends for a good time and then it just escalated from there?
Definitely, definitely. It was all a bunch of fun growing up. And, some of those friends stopped and the ones that kind of stuck around with me and didn't it, we all realized we all had a lot of childhood trauma, which, makes sense. It blocks everything and you feel that happiness, regardless if it's fake or not. But looking back, what I lost, my job, friends, families, my own self-worth, it was definitely not worth it. But I couldn't see that at the time. I was in denial about having a problem until I really realized I had a problem. And, a lot of finances went and sometimes I'll sit in that, but that's part of my story now and that's okay. That's why I keep pushing forward to prove not to anyone, just to myself.
And that's the only person you have to prove to yourself. It doesn't really matter what anyone else thinks of you or how they judge you with their past. At the end of the day, their opinion doesn't matter. As long as you can make yourself happy and you're progressing and doing what's right for yourself, that's all you got to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. My brother always says the saying, what other people think of you is none of your business. And yeah, it's true. For me, the work that I put in, yes, it was great that I had people around and professionals to help me, but the person that does the hard work and puts it in, it's yourself. And it's sad to say, some people like you save yourself on your own, but you got the supports around, you can, but the hard work, it is you. It's almost like you can take the horse to the water, but you can't make it drink. People can throw all these things at you, but you need to want it.
100%. You can't change or make improvements in your life because someone else wants it for you. You have to truly want it yourself and put the effort in yourself.
Definitely. It's not easy, but it's very liberating and freeing once you get to the other side, because I feel like I've conquered that. I can conquer anything that kind of comes your way.
Yeah. And do you find comfort in speaking to other people who have been through similar situations? When you speak to someone, you go, oh, I felt this way when this happened. And then someone goes, oh, I completely understand you. I've lived that experience as well.
Yeah. Look, for me, one of the biggest people that helped me overcome was one of my best friends that's been through very similar. So for us, understanding that we weren't alone and, because when things like when you get sexually abused as a young kid, it kickstarts emotions and feelings that, children shouldn't be. And you start to have dreams of things that you don't want to have dreams of, but you can't control that. And when you wake up, you can have those feelings of feeling dirty or, you just hate what's happening. But hearing someone else go through that as well makes it more normalized that, it's not you. There's not something wrong with you, that it's unfortunately what happens as a result of abuse or a trauma that you went through.
Yeah. And it's even, although everyone's story and everyone's experience are unique, being able to bounce off someone who can actually understand. I guess when you speak to people who have never been through it, you can explain the feeling as much and as much detail as you can, but they'll never truly understand what you've experienced. So I think that peer support helps a lot of people in whatever barriers they're trying to overcome in their life.
Yeah, definitely. And I always tell people, just be aware, because there are people out there that won't understand, and it can come across as rude and it kind of dims your light a bit, but don't let anyone change you or take you off your path and what you're deciding to do, because it can happen, but never doubt in yourself.
And I think a lot of people might sometimes try and take you off your path or tell you that you can't do something because really they're afraid that they can't do it. So they'll put their insecurities on you.
I agree. Look, I didn't have a good friendship growing up. I chose interesting people, and you'll be surprised how many people, don't bring value into your life. So that's one thing that you also build when you go through your trauma, like something I'm still learning, but healthy boundaries. If people aren't there for the positive and are there to benefit both ways, then, you got to cut them off. But trauma creates you to want to please people. And I always say it's really nice and continue to. I still do, but don't let it take away from your journey of healing, because it's very easy to help others, but not yourself.
Yeah, definitely. You always got to remember you can't help others unless you're in a good position yourself. So take care of yourself, then you're about to support others in even more capacity.
Exactly. It's like the oxygen thing of a plane. You got to put it on yourself first to help your kids. Sort of the same thing.
Yeah, great analogy. So let's shift our focus now. So when you originally come to atWork Australia as a client, When did you actually come as a client? How long
Yeah,
ago was that?
it was back in 2021.
2020. So,
Or 20, it was just before COVID hit the first
oh,
time. So
okay.
maybe
Yeah.
2020. I
Yeah,
don't
right.
even know how long it's yet.
Yeah,
2020.
it's been a couple of years now. So what were some of the tools and strategies that you started working on to help yourself to be able to progress towards employment?
When I started, I had an amazing job coach called Alicia. I doubted myself a lot because I was medically retired from the job before. And it's something, I studied, I really wanted to be, and it kind of broke me. So I had no trust in myself that I was going to be able to do anything. So they helped me. First, I was studying and they helped me with, buying a chair and table. And I thought, oh, this place is amazing. And then one day, I walked in there and, there was another job coach called John and he believed in me. And that's where they said, there's this amazing job. And I was like, oh, I can't do that. This is, atWork is not my field. And that's when they started to have this explain. I had empathy and they communicated and told me about transferable skills. And I'm like, what are you talking about? What are these transferable skills? And, working with empathy and, communicating, just those two were transferable skills from my old job to this. So they built me up. They helped me with my resume because my resume was like 5 pages. They helped me apply. I actually didn't apply. And then she called me back up and she's like, you need to apply, because she knew I had doubt in me. And then, I ended up applying for the role and ended up getting the job. But if it wasn't for Alicia, it was like she was a friend. She was there during COVID, which was great. She even came out on my first day. It definitely made it easier, help with vouchers and getting you clothes to start, because I was embarrassed to work because I didn't have work clothes. I kind of tossed them all out because it was a trigger. So, it was amazing. And they got me equipment for work, like, laptop, keyboards, they've always been their support. So I was so lucky to find an employment service like this, because I've never been to one that has, helped this much and
And
cared.
even some of the small things you just mentioned, like the clothing, I guess a lot of people just take that for granted. I wouldn't give that a second thought about the type of clothing that they're going to wear to work, or that could even create a triggering situation.
Yeah. Look, I didn't realize until I was one day cleaning out my wardrobe and all the work clothes from my old job were there. And I didn't know what to do because it kept reminding me of, that period in my life. And then a friend's like, toss it. And I'm like, I can't do that. What am I going to do? And for me, it was financial. And then I realized it was easier for me to let it go than to keep it. It was going to cause me more harm. So I did. And then I was in trackies for like 2 years. And then COVID hit. So there was more trackies. So when I went to work, I was like embarrassed. I couldn't afford the clothes, not on Centrelink money. And the fact that they helped me, I even took photos and sent them to her because I was like, is this too much? Should I wear this? So she was so supportive. It was like I had a little, fashion person that could help me out for work and get me comfortable and confident again.
I'm glad you were able to get that support when you arrived at atWork Australia. And then you were successful. The job you were successful with was a job coach position with atWork Australia. How do you think your life journey, your personal experiences overcoming the challenges that you faced were able to help support other people to be able to overcome their barriers to find employment?
So for me, going into that job coach role it was good because I got to see the other side of how scary it is. One, to come see some new person, especially, with my mental health. And then getting into the job, I could understand some of the, reluctancy, especially people when they're not showing up to appointments. Like I had that understanding that there's a reason usually why people do what they do. And it's, it was being kind and understanding their story. So for me, that really helped. And, a lot of people with mental health would come to me and be like, I can't do anything. I've got mental health. I even hate saying this word, but they'll say I'm too dumb. And I would say to them, because they didn't know I had it, and I would say to them, do you think I'm dumb? I would use the same words that they use. And they'll be like, no, you're great, you're this, you're that. And I was like, well, I have my own mental health. I'm most of the time on the same medications that they're on. So for that, it was really uplifting for them. So I really, really, really enjoyed that. And for me, it was a step to get back into, helping others, but not being as intense as it was in my old work. It's more meaningful for me because I've lived
Yeah.
that path, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. I think you can build a closer connection and have better understanding of what a person's been through and they genuinely need support and have been through a traumatic past.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of the time people, they're so strong or push back they don't want to think about it. But, it does bubble up, and that's okay. We're all human. That's what I tell people. We all go through things at a certain point in our life, and that's okay. But I always say be as transparent as possible. Because when I guess being now on a job coach side, if you don't let them know of something, sometimes it can be really hard for some job coaches to understand. I have the luxury, I guess, of doing the social work degree, but not everyone understands everyone in that way. But if you're able to vocalize it, it can make it a lot easier for both sides.
Yeah, and I guess that's a great segue into my next question. It's like you've been working as a job coach, but you've also been studying a social work degree for the past number of years. Can you tell us more about the role you're doing now? And I guess it's more of your dream role to be working as a social worker.
Yeah, so after I left school, I went to TAFE for a bit because didn't get the mark, then bridged my way back into uni. So I finished about 10 years ago now, uni. And yeah, it was social work. I worked in the department for years, but it was definitely not a supportive environment. That's where I ended up leaving. I think I probably got worse with my mental health. And then coming into here, I started off as a job coach. But at the time, I said it doesn't matter because it was a way for me to build a routine again, working 5 days a week, and then, building my confidence again, working in such an amazing place. They built my confidence. So I'll get to the counsellor soon, but I've had a few more roles. So I went from job coach to in-work support, and then from in-work support, I was probably there for about a year. I even acted up a bit for my service manager over the Christmas break, which was nice and encouraging because, yet again, didn't think I could do that. And that's when the counsellor role kind of popped up. And my regional manager and manager, I've always been talking to them that I would love to go back into it, but I doubted myself a lot. If it wasn't for them and some teammates, I probably wouldn't even have applied. Then I applied for it and I got an interview, and I'd never prepared so much in my life. And of course, I used none of those notes. It was really, really good. And I got the job. And I had mixed emotions. I didn't know if I was happy. I didn't know if what I was feeling, but I was really anxious before I started, probably in a long time. Then I realized that excitement and feeling anxious, it's actually the same feeling. You can't really tell the difference in your belly. So I think obviously I was excited and anxious. So I used the excited part as my drive and reminded myself, you've been to jobs before, you've done really hard things in your life, you've overcome them. So, even if they might not look like it now, you'll overcome this too. And now I've been here for a month.
That's fantastic, and congratulations to finally working your way back to be in the position that you originally dreamed of working in. So it's a huge credit for yourself to put that effort in and get back to that point.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
And do you think throughout your studies and throughout your education that that sort of helped you with your own mental health concerns? As you were learning about it from a textbook and from your lecturer, you started to help you piece together and understand what was going on inside your brain?
Yeah, I love that you said that. So I went to TAFE first, and definitely it was like a self-help, thing for me. I didn't realize at the time that's what I was doing, but halfway through, I realized this is really helpful. And I guess for what I wanted to do, I had to go through uni because originally I wanted to be a youth worker, but then I wanted more. And first, when I started, I would say, yes, it was, through uni, through all the studies. But then when I got into work and I worked in the department for many years, I realized because I hadn't built healthy boundaries and I hadn't dealt with my own trauma, that I wasn't able to protect myself from, situations. And that's kind of got me further into my trauma because it brought a lot of my own out. I was confronted with stories all the time, and I didn't understand that because I hadn't dealt with mine, it was really hard to process theirs as well safely. Where now that I've been able to work through it, that 2 years that I had off work and then, found atWork and kind of went back into the workforce.
After the few years out of work, you sort of your own through education sort of help you sort of overcome your own trauma.
Yeah.
And sort of when you were listening to other people explain their stories, I guess that would have been very triggering for you as well, but you were able to go back and realize that's because you haven't fully dealt with your own trauma and you need to seek your own support.
Yeah, definitely. And the more I did that, now I'm in a place where I've got healthy boundaries. I don't say yes to everyone. I know what my limits are. And I, respect myself enough that other people need to abide by, my boundaries. And if they don't, then, that person's not a safe person, or I'm able to speak up on my behalf now. So I've definitely created safer coping strategies. Self-care is a big one as well. It can't just be work, work, work. Even working through my own trauma, still, it's always an ongoing thing. You still need to do things you love. Like for me, it's music, dancing, singing. They're my escape route. So you've got to find something that works for you.
And do you sing in the bedroom by yourself, or you like to hit up a karaoke bar?
Both. I did singing classes actually at the start of last year, and that was to build my confidence. Another thing that I would never thought in a million years, my family has never heard me sing, and now everyone at work has heard me sing, and that was just because I was so shy and so insecure within myself. So it's a huge change on how much I've grown as a person, but singing something I've always wanted to do, but I was always too shy, so I did it as an adult.
Sounds like you're in a very good place now and that you're living a much happier and healthier life and quite content with where things are at.
Definitely. And that's why I share my story, just so people, they know that there's hope on the other side. It is a hard road, but once you get to the other end, or just even your first step, it helps so much. And it's very courageous and brave.
And while we're sort of going down that pathway, what would your advice be to people out there who might be facing similar challenges to you, or that their barrier to employment or challenge, whatever their trauma in life might be? What would your advice be to them trying to make that first step and to be able to get the support they need to be able to overcome that barrier?
Yeah, so I would definitely say you're not alone. Your struggles don't define you. You're worth so much more. You have your inner strength that shines even through those tough times. Remember, your health challenges or disabilities don't make you less valuable. If anything, they make you more unique. You go through so much, which builds so much resilience. So keep your head high and move forward with the courage. Your journey is worth celebrate, even the small ones. Your potential is limitless. Just remember, you do need to put the hard work in. No one's going to do it for you. So, keep shining, keep pushing through. And, the grass is greener on the other side, and you're capable of anything.
And it sounds like you've worked so hard on yourself to be able to get where you are today and achieve your goals. And what's next for you? What are your goals for the future?
Ooh, what are my plans for the future? Look, I would love to, career-wise, obviously I would still want to, spread my wings and be able to help people that are going through the same experience as me. Also, I guess on a personal level, I guess the next step for me is starting a family. I've dealt with a lot of health stuff. I've got my endometriosis and polycystic ovaries, had a huge surgery just before I started this job. So the next part in that life is starting that. And for me, being a bit older, I feel like I've wasted time and I didn't have kids younger. But now that I've worked through it, I understand why it wouldn't have been a good environment for me to bring up kids. So now I'm definitely excited for that next challenge.
I think the next challenge might be one of the biggest challenges. I've got 2 young girls at the moment, and they're a handful. So best of luck with your next challenge, and I hope it happens for you.
Well, they say you never regret having kids, but I know it's definitely going to be a hard road ahead, but it's an exciting one, and one that I think I've worked hard enough to be able to have some coping, skills and to stop my generational trauma.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like you say, it is a hard road having kids, but it's definitely the most enjoyable. But at times you still do need your breathing techniques when you're trying to negotiate with a 2-year-old.
Yes, maybe I can get them to join in meditating together, teach them from a young age.
Well, Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me today and coming sharing some about your inspirational journey. I really have enjoyed learning more about your past, and thank you so much for sharing. And I wish you all the best for whatever challenges you take on in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks everyone for tuning in for another episode of Candid Conversations with Shaun. I really hope you enjoyed hearing about Vanessa's story. She is truly a remarkable woman. She's overcome so much in her life and continues to go on and achieve her goals. If you found anything we discussed today traumatic or triggering, please seek support. Please refer to the links in our show notes to see where you can seek help. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time.